Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, November 14th, and this is the newest installment on the Countdown to Obamacare webinar series. And today we're going to talk about minimum value plans and IRS Notice 2014-69. And this release came out on Tuesday, November 4th, which was Election Day, and that wasn't a coincidence. And we're going to talk a little bit today about what this notice means to employers and what you can do about it. So we're going to give you 5 practical tips about what you need to know. And if you're new to our webinar series, my name is Kaya Bromley. I'm the president of Your Obamacare Advisors and the author of the book, The Employer's Guide to Obamacare. It's available on Amazon. And I've been an attorney for 12 years, mostly in the restaurant industry. And I have been advising employers, hundreds of employers in fact, over the last several years on the Affordable Care Act. And my specialty is in strategy. So I teach employers the basics of what they need to know about the law, but more importantly, I help them learn how to strategize with their implementation. And this webinar series is sponsored by Freedom Care Benefits. Freedom Care Benefits is a program that was created specifically to deal with the ACA. And it has the only guaranteed compliant program that I've seen across the country. And I've been advising Freedom Care as they created the program, and I continue to advise them on their ACA compliance. And from Freedom Care today, we're very lucky to have Bob Gardner, the Business Development Coordinator from Freedom Care Benefits. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Kay. I look forward to talking with you during your seminar.
Yeah, thank you. So let's jump in. So before, if you've been on my webinars yet, you know I always give a warning, but it's a little bit different this time. Usually I say don't panic. If you have not done anything yet and you don't have a plan in place, I'm going to tell you it might be a little bit time to panic. Not panic so that you're not productive, but if you're complacent and you think that you have time, think again. I was on a panel today with a very large broker of another program who announced to the audience that if you wanted to get into his plan, that it would probably be about February or March before you could get into his plan. Now that's a problem for you as an employer because your penalties are going to begin to accrue on January 1. So you've really run out of time to sit on the sidelines and think about it. You need to pull the trigger on something. And at the end of this webinar, we're going to talk about what your best options are if you have not put something into place, and you need to just make sure that you're compliant. Because as I talk about on every webinar and every presentation that I do, it's critical that you avoid the penalties at all costs. It's not that expensive to avoid the penalties. There are insurance products out there that are cheaper than the penalties, which are not tax deductible. The insurance programs are, and it's just poor planning to expose yourself, or if you are a broker, to allow your employer clients to be exposed to the penalties. So without further ado, let me give you first just kind of a quick overview of what this IRS notice did. It was released jointly by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Treasury, and it addresses specifically group health plans that fail to cover inpatient hospitalization services and physician services. Now, these are not final regs, but it does say that you have to comply with these regs, and final regs will be forthcoming. We anticipate those will be out in about around March. So what does the notice provide? Well, it basically says that in order to qualify as a minimum value plan, that the plan must include hospitalization and physician coverage. Why is this an earth-shattering, notification? Because prior to this notice, there were different insurance companies that could get away, could satisfy the online calculator that was put out by the Department of Health and Human Services and not have hospitalization or physician coverage and still qualify as a minimum value plan. So what these departments did is they clarified, saying, okay, we don't care what our calculators say, your plan has to have hospitalization and physician coverage in order to qualify as minimum value. So it's kind of a big deal, especially if you are one of the employers who either bought one of those plans or was planning that as your strategy. They were obviously lower cost, and they were easy to implement. And now that strategy has a little bit of a monkey wrench in it. So we're going to talk about what you do if that was your strategy. And even if that wasn't your strategy, let this be a learning lesson to all of us that even when we think that we've got this down, this thing is a moving target. It's changing constantly. We all have to stay on top of these changes. And even if this wasn't your strategy, we're going to talk at the end about the strategies that are compliant, that are available, that you could still sign up for, or your clients could still sign up for before the end of the year. So remind you again, what is minimum value? Let's do a little bit of refresher. So to refresh your memory, in order to satisfy penalty A, a large employer must offer minimum essential coverage, which is not very well defined in the law. Minimum essential coverage just means an employer-sponsored plan. But to satisfy penalty B, the large employer must offer a plan that is affordable and minimum value. That's where the term minimum value comes in. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail because we've done this ad nauseum in other webinars. But at this point, we're only going to talk about minimum value. The other thing that, before I define it, the other thing that you need to know is that when a large employer offers a plan that's MEC, and it's affordable, and it's minimum value, once it offers those items to a full-time employee, that full-time employee cannot receive a subsidy or tax credit on the insurance exchange. Now, this is a critical piece that we're going to talk about later. So you need to realize that when we're talking about guaranteeing your compliance, we're talking about making sure that you satisfy these two prongs, the penalty A prong and the penalty B prong. The result of that is that your employees can no longer get a subsidy on the exchange. The reason that's important to you is that your employees receiving a subsidy on the exchange is what triggers very large penalties to you. So the guaranteed compliance means doing whatever it takes to make sure that the employee is offered the coverage that they're required to be offered, and they can no longer go to the exchange and trigger a penalty for you. So the definition of minimum value means that the plan achieves a 60% actuarial value. 60% actuarial value means that 60% of the premiums collected must be used for health care. It's funny that we have to say that, but prior to the ACA, this wasn't always the case, and a lot of money was used for different things that had nothing to do with health care. It had to do with administrative costs and fees and things like that. The reason I've got the skull and crossbones at the HHS online calculator is you can no longer just rely on the calculators. You now have a new definition to rely on, which means whatever the calculator says, but you also have to have hospitalization coverage and physician coverage. So what does this change mean to you if you're an employer or you're someone who advises employers? Well, if you already entered into a binding contract to provide one of these plans prior to November 4th, and the plan is going to actually begin before March 1st, 2015, you get a free pass. You can still keep that plan. However, what you need to understand is that your employees will still receive a subsidy on the exchange as long as you provide the proper notices. Why is this critical? Well, typically, if you offered a plan that was minimum value, remember your employees would not receive a subsidy on the exchange. So the fact that now there's this exposure that you could offer this plan that's not compliant, but you got this free pass, and your employees can still receive subsidies on the exchange. This is a huge red flag for those of us who are practicing law in this area, because sometimes complying with just the shared responsibility penalties or mandates in avoiding those penalties doesn't necessarily mean that you comply with other penalties or other mandates. So let me give you an example. You can comply with the penalty A and penalty B, and you could still not comply with the margin of error rules, the 95%, which is 70% in 2015. So if you have exposure where you have the ability for your employees to still go receive subsidies on the exchange, there's other red flags that are being raised that could expose you to other things. So even though you have this free pass, I would suggest to you that it may not be your best option. You may still choose to not keep that non-compliant plan and go ahead and get into a compliant plan right now so that you are fully compliant as of January 1st, 2015. So I talked a little bit about the notices. In order to get that transition relief, you have to give certain notices. The first notice that you would have to give is you'd have to notify your employees that even though you're offering this plan that doesn't offer hospitalization and physician coverage, that your employees can still qualify for financial assistance on the exchange. If you previously sent a notice telling them that they were not going to qualify, you need to correct that notice. And then finally, if you also have another compliant plan in addition to this non-compliant plan, you don't have to offer notice. So it seems more complicated than it is. It's pretty straightforward. So what if you are one of the employers that was adopting this plan, or you're a broker that was adopting this plan? Well, it's not your plan any longer. You can adopt the transition relief, like I said, but it raises so many other red flags that I don't really recommend it. You have enough time to get into a compliant plan, and when you've got contrasting, contradictory information with the IRS, it's not going to be a good thing. So you're also out of time to really get cute about trying to find different strategies, and at this point you really need to be compliant. The other reason that transition relief concerns me is that even among very educated attorneys that are teaching about the ACA, we all differ about the interpretation about some of the provisions. And we're all right because there is no well-settled precedent yet. But where this should really concern you is, similarly, all of the IRS agents and the regulatory employees who have been hired to implement this law, they have thousands of different interpretations of this law, and they have a lot of leeway in how they assess penalties, how they do your audits, things like that. So it's not something that is going to be really clear-cut, and just because you have this transition relief, who knows if you're going to remember it, if they're going to remember it. It's not really clean, and lawyers are risk adverse, and we want to protect our clients, and we want you to make sure that you're doing something that has as little risk as possible. And I would suggest to you that it has a lot of risk. So I'd also like to talk now with Bob about Freedom Care, because obviously Freedom Care is a sponsor of this webinar series, but Freedom Care also has always had a compliant program, and remains compliant, but they are a great answer for employers who still need to, still have not planned what they're going to do yet, or if you're on the fence and you haven't decided yet. And also even for companies that adopted this non-compliant plan and now want to get into compliance, which I strongly recommend. So I've invited Bob on the webinar this week to talk a little bit about Freedom Care, give us some of the basics. And one of the things, Bob, I'd like you to talk about is start with just giving us a broad overview of Freedom Care Basic and Freedom Care Plus.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kaya. Freedom Care was really, our whole goal with Freedom Care was to be offering a 100% compliant product and always had the business owner in mind. So from day one, we've never taken an approach to skirt the law or maybe, adjust it in our favor. So we feel like, from day one, and really this new regulatory changes that came out really solidifies our position in the market for being the only ACA self-funded program out there that we know of. And how we do that is we have two products that work hand in hand with each other to obtain that ACA compliance. And they are Freedom Care Basic and Freedom Care Plus. They were specifically designed to answer and address the requirements of the $2,000 and $3,000 penalties that these large employers are facing. Freedom Care Basic is that minimal essential coverage plan that includes all the 64 wellness and preventative items that are outlined in the ACA. Freedom Care Basic is our recommendation that It is given to all full-time eligible employees at no cost sharing. At the point that you do that, you're satisfying both the employer's $2,000 penalty and also the individual mandate on that behalf. That's just half the formula. Our second portion is our Freedom Care Plus product, which is our minimum value plan, which has always included hospitalization and emergency room coverage. It includes all 10 of those essential health benefits that were aligned in the ACA. So it both meets that affordability aspect and the minimum value aspect that's required to satisfy that $3,000 penalty. But different from Freedom Care Basic, where Freedom Care Basic is given to everyone at no cost sharing, Freedom Care Plus is offered to everyone at that point, and it's up to that individual employee if they want to buy up for this extra program to contact us and obtain that information. So, by doing that, that's how we're able to, meet the compliance of the ACA at a very low, affordable cost to these large employers.
And one of the most significant things about the Freedom Care Plan is this ACA compliance guarantee. Now, I personally have advised Freedom Care on giving this guarantee, and I worked closely with their outside counsel who actually drafted and developed the guarantee program. That's something that I haven't seen from any other company across the country to actually guarantee ACA compliance. That's a pretty significant piece of their plan. The other thing, Bob, can you talk a little bit about the pricing? I sat on a panel today where we talked about all different pricing, especially for employers that either have lower wage workers or have very large numbers of employees that they did not insure in the past that now they have to insure. I know your pricing used to be the $100 per employee per day, but you guys changed that. Can you talk about why and what your new pricing structure looks like?
Yeah, no, definitely so. We're very excited about this, and when these regulatory changes happen and really, after the dust settled, and we're really one of the only self-funded plans out there that, are compliant. So, like I said, from day one we've been that way, but also what we've done, it's been very unique to the insurance environment, like you said, and you helped us structure this, is our compliance certification and legal white pages. That's, like you were saying, it's really kind of unheard of in the insurance industry to get a guarantee for any type of coverage, and mostly for this new health insurance thing. So I think that really makes us very unique. But since that's a component of but since these new regulatory changes happen and allow these other players have now kind of taken a back seat in the market, it increased our market share unbelievably the last week and a half. And by doing so, we've been able to go back to some of our vendors or reinsurance carrier and renegotiate some of these prices that we have. And in turn, we've done a really good job, and now we're rolling those prices down to the end user, these large business owners, and we're offering a rate for $65, $75 per person per month that is 100% compliant. That's not a rate for a skinny plan or a MEC-only program. It's our fully compliant program that, we give our Freedom Care Basic and offer our Freedom Care Plus, and that satisfies both the $2,000 and $3,000 penalty, and once again, the individual mandate. So I think, now we've really achieved something really unique and different with our compliance, with our price structure now, and there's really nobody in the market that's touching us.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant thing, because in this panel were some very, very knowledgeable professionals throughout the industry, and they were all comparing prices, and that $65 price was the price they were giving for a MEC-only plan or a skinny plan. And what you guys have done is you've found a way to price both your entire strategy that satisfies both A and B at $65. So that to me is pretty spectacular. And then also, you had mentioned to me today that different employers have different plans that already are in place, and they might not need both the whole Freedom Care Basic and Freedom Care Plus, which is required to get the guarantee. But even if they don't want to do the whole guaranteed program, you do have the ability to do with some flexibility to maybe piece out some of these items, correct?
Correct. I mean, we do have an option for those employers that say that, maybe they're interested in just satisfying that $2,000 penalty. Like you said, it's probably the easiest one to satisfy because there's a ton of options out there. So we do have a kind of our MEC only, we call it MEC Basic, that just applies those 63 wellness and preventative items, and it just satisfies the individual mandate, and it also satisfies the employer's $2,000 penalty. So we have that for those large employers that are looking for that quick solution, and our pricing on that is right around it's right at $49.50. So it's giving them that option who don't want to spend that extra, whatever, 20 bucks to be fully compliant, that at least they're satisfying that initial hit of that $2,000 penalty. But also, I think you were saying we have a little bit more flexibility in the situation where a large employer maybe has a more robust, fully compliant program for its upper management, owners, and key management people. We allow a existing plan to run parallel with ours for those upper management people and owners. So we recommend to keep that plan in place, and then roll Freedom Care out to all these newly insured employees that they now have to offer insurance to. And that seems to be really working good with all of our clients nationwide, that they're taking advantage of that current model that's allowed under the ACA with no discrimination coming into play, that they can ride that out this year.
And the reason that's allowed for anyone that's questioning this, because I get this question quite often, right now the ACA has not released its non-discrimination rules yet. We anticipate them being released soon, but we don't anticipate them being in effect for 2015. So during 2015, you still can have basically what we call a management carve-out plan, and offer a Freedom Care type plan to your entire workforce, to make sure that you have kind of this blanket of compliance so that you've satisfied A and B. But then if you want to offer something more robust to your executives and your management team, you can do this carve out. That's not saying that you'll be able to do that in 2016. No one knows. No one knows what the Supreme Court hearing is going to hold. So, but for right now, we're confident that you can do this until we get the non-discrimination rules. But Bob, I also want to talk a little bit, real briefly, because we have covered this in other webinars, but there's parts of Freedom Care that are beneficial to an employer even if they didn't have to deal with the ACA. Can you talk about this, your financial vehicle that you guys have created for this program?
Yeah, most definitely. And, kind of going back to when we first started with Freedom Care, we had two goals in mind. One was to be 100% ACA compliant all the time at the lowest affordable cost, and we feel like we've done that with our Freedom Care and Freedom Care Plus product. But the second key part of our program in Freedom Care was to offer this unique financial vehicle that helped offset some of the costs that these employers are now facing. And we're able to do that we actually wrote the law in the state of South Dakota that combined being self-insured, owning your own small insurance company, and a business trust together. Seems like a lot, but we handle all the behind the scenes on it. And really what the benefit is that you pay your premium right around $65 per person per month. In that, there is $18 that's allocated for claims for Freedom Care Basic, which all employees will have. With low utilization, we're currently expecting very low utilization, under 2% utilization that actually use that Freedom Care Basic benefits, and very low claims costs, right around $2.78. So that $18, since it's a self-funded plan, that $18 is the business owner's money. And if it's not spent on a per person per month basis, that money is returned to the business owner, and it comes back to them income tax free. And you say, well, why can we do it income tax free? When we wrote the law in South Dakota, we modeled it after IRS Code 831D, which basically says that any small to medium-sized insurance company that has claims dollars that is not used is turned into underwriting profit, and that underwriting profit comes back to the individual owner, income tax free. So that's a nice scenario. And somebody says, well, that really makes sense. I like the idea of $18 possibly coming back to me. But even on a larger note, a company that comes with us, now they have this financial vehicle, and say that they're profitable $500,000 and they pay maybe 40% taxes on that $500,000. Well, now since they have our financial vehicle, this captive trust scenario, they can take that $500,000 off their corporate books, put it onto their insurance company books. Once it comes on their insurance company books, that's overfunding premiums, and that money is now income tax free as long as it sits in our self-directed insurance trust. Now somebody says, wow, I can make 40% on my money. That's a no-brainer. Plus, they're giving me this very low, affordable ACA 100% compliant product. It makes perfect sense to go with Freedom Care and not delay.
And if anyone on the call would like to learn more about the self-insurance component of this program or alternative risk financing in general, we did do 2 webinars earlier on in the season. I did them both with Mark LaPointe, who is the president of Freedom Care and who is probably the most knowledgeable individual that I have ever met about that knows about alternative risk financing, and he was a wealth of knowledge. So if that's something that interests you, and it should, whenever I'm talking about all of the different strategies that Obamacare has created for us, most of it is in this area of self-insurance. It's something that's been recognized and kind of protected by the legislature and the regulators all along. So it's something that we know is a rock solid strategy. Bob, before we wrap up, what does if someone's interested in learning more about Freedom Care or getting a quote for a group, what do they need to do?
Yeah, it's a very simple process. They can, reach out to me directly at freedomcare.com. It's, bob.gardner@freedomcarebenefits, or just go to our website and I'm on there. But really, to get a proposal, and like you said, we're kind of down to the last, final hour. People really need to act, and we're able to we're not giving that big delay like you gave that scenario, saying March or February. We're still plugging along and can guarantee everybody compliance by 1/1. But all we need is a name of the company, the address, and a list of all the employees. We don't need dates of birth, socials, and we can usually get you back a official proposal within 24 hours or sometimes even shorter and get the process rolling. So it's a very easy aspect to get that.
Excellent. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining me this week. That was very, very helpful, and I know if you're on this call and you have, like I said, a large number of employees that you have to insure and you didn't insure that number in the past, this is definitely a program that you should look into. If you're a broker and this is not in your arsenal or your bag of tricks, it should be. It's a solid program, and it's there is no one size fits all. Freedom Care is not for everybody, but it's something you should look into because it might be the right one for your clients. So join us next week, and we will send an email announcing what next week's topic is going to be. Thank you to our sponsor, Freedom Care Benefits, for putting this on and providing this great resource to all of you at no cost to you. And also, all of my old webinars that we've done so far this season are available on the website, yourobamacareadvisors.com. And we look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you everyone for your time.